Oh, now you're going to record. Well, thank you, everyone. Obviously, I believe everyone here is pretty familiar with, our big data peer group. And, this roundtable discussion, I want to emphasize is for, everyone to be engaged and participate. This isn't a, speaker topic as we do with many others. I'll skip through here. We have the members of our group, which I know Emily had some, had that up on hers. So I like to just set the tone because we talk about big data and we talk about, what is big data? Because there are the technical definitions of what big data is. There are definitions that are used, but it's really is. There's no concrete definition. There's no it's X amount of gigabytes, it's X amount of terabytes, it's, with this range, it's this kind of, information. It's just kind of a general, but, Oracle and IBM, I think, are fairly decent benchmarks or guideposts. They may have dealt with this a little bit in the past. Oracle defines it, and I thought this was really fitting. A definition of big data is a data set that contains greater variety, arriving in increasing volumes, and with more velocity. They call it the 3 V's. And I think this was a really good capturing of it, because big data isn't necessarily a size in storage. It really is when big data gets larger, more complex, from data sources, when the data sets are so voluminous that traditional data processing software can't manage them. And I thought this was a really good capturing of what big data really means. And I figured the IBM, definition here of big data is it can be defined as a data set whose size or type is beyond the ability of traditional relational databases to capture, manage, and process the data with low latency. Characteristics of big data include high volume, high velocity, high variety. And so both really kind of are synergistic definitions. And I think they really capture it because, as we talked about before, we really discussed, what point does it reach that big data mark rather than just being a traditional data set. And I really think more so than just the size, it really fits with these definitions, the variety, the volume, and the velocity. And so, we had discussed this, in our peer groups about, big data really has kind of symbiotic pillars. There's really kind of an ecosystem around big data, because big data in and of itself is the capturing of that data, but how it's captured, what you do with it, how we make sense of it, really are sort of pillars of that same stool or table, where you kind of have these legs that go together to keep everything coalesced and upright. And so, in general, and obviously there are many ancillary things that go along with big data, but in general, you have big data, which is typically, a lot of it's being generated from IoT, Internet of Things, we need to get information and actually be able to glean and learn something off of it and extract meaning from it, or business intelligence, which, when I say business intelligence, it's not just business as in private company. That's really the general term for extracting the meaning, whether it's for science, whether it's for, government, whether it's, no matter what it's used for. And then artificial intelligence and machine learning, to really, start to grasp what to do with the big data and what can be done with the big data. So, Internet of Things, and I'm going through this quickly because I know, everyone here, I believe, is very familiar with a lot of these topics. IoT is where much of the big data is generated. It represents an ecosystem of billions to trillions. The numbers getting to the point where even being able to quantify it's becoming difficult. Trillions of sensors collecting and collection sources. And I put that in there because, we're really getting a lot of big data from, not necessarily a device, a physical machine, but also, kind of this almost software bots. They're tracking, IPs, movements, clicks, tracing, all the information. And they really provide a similar type of structure and gathering as a physical device, except they're software. So they're kind of almost a software IoT, but they're gathering massive amounts of data in parallel because each one's focused on a specific area. And aggregate, the volumes ended up being massive amounts of data, creating big data sets. And this is another important point of IoT and really big data in general, as typical scenario that we're seeing nowadays, especially with storage becoming so ubiquitous and so cheap, that we have this sort of lasts forever kind of concept. I mean, we collect data, and in so many cases, that data is going to last forever. It's not rolled over, it's not overwritten, it's not discarded at some point. We just continue to collect and collect and collect as much as we can, and it really doesn't go away. So that just balloons these big data sets. Business intelligence, as I mentioned before, isn't about business per se, as in private. It's really, what can you get from the big data? I mean, the industry norm now is, and when I say the industry norm, it just means that there's a lot of this going on where we kind of get the IoT, we get the collection of it. We say, what can we collect? We, put things in place to collect all this data, and then a lot of times it's after the fact that we're trying to figure out what to do with this data or what can we do with this data. It's not always the case, but there's a lot of that going on. Big data is no use if you, and this is why business intelligence is one of the pillars. Big data is no use if you can't extract information and meaning from it. And, correlating information from big data and being able to extract that information and that meaning can be very challenging. And that's where, this has really arisen. And these two, a lot of people think that they're the same or different terms for the same thing. They really are different, but they're, yin and yang. They're a relationship between them, but they really are two different things between artificial intelligence and machine learning. And again, I referred to IBM because I like to, get a good perspective of what, some major sources really define these as. IBM defines artificial intelligence as leveraging computers and machines to mimic the problem solving and decision making capabilities of the human mind. One of the interesting things is they talk about mimicking the human mind, but really they actually want it to be more rational and more intelligent than the human mind. And so when they say mimicking the human mind, what they're really talking about is being able to have rational decision making, quote unquote, thought, so that it can extrapolate, it can infer things that aren't explicitly given or designed or programmed, into it, that it can grow and that it can learn how to make those decisions that aren't clear cut and that aren't necessarily initially designed directly for it. And machine learning is really that's why I say they're a symbiotic relationship, because machine learning really is the branch of artificial intelligence and computer science, which focuses on the use of data and algorithms to imitate the way humans learn, gradually improving its accuracy. So the artificial intelligence is the decision-making side. The machine learning is how do you train the artificial intelligence to learn how to make those decisions. And then this really gets into the core of what the big question is. Why big data? Why do we bother with this? Why is it important? And big data and the symbiotic pillars are really the key to understanding the fundamental questions in business, science, humanity, and really all aspects of what's around us. I'll make an analogy because I love studying science and physics and astronomy. But they have the space engine, which has been really quite amazing at using relativity and physics to model systems, model things that we see in the stars. And a lot of times we look at it and then we look at the actual observations and we say, man, that modeled it really well. It's understood. And it's really kind of the same for big data. It's allowing us to really start to get to a really key, modeling of systems and large systems and systems of systems that are complex, and really getting to some strong understandings of that small data sets and simple algorithms rather than modeling can't really get us to. It's also a natural consequence of our ability to collect data. As I mentioned before, we really have this interesting scenario where just because we can, we do. So the more ability we have to collect data and collect things, we just start piling on data and data and data. And now naturally the next step is, we need to do something with it. And this last one is a very important, part is big data isn't just an academic exercise. Even 10, 20 years ago, big data really was the realm of, some, IBM and Oracle and academic institutions, and they were really trying to develop it, and they were really trying to understand it and get the tools in the place. And where we are now in our current realm is, this really is practical, has practical and real world applications that truly are fundamentally critical to the long-term success and survival of organizations. And that's large and small. It's no longer just the realm of, big universities or, science labs, national labs or large businesses. It really is something that everybody needs to take practical application. And there really is a lot of growing compute resources that are available. The cost of compute that has come down, and the ability to collect and the tools that are available has really brought it to where people can and they need to start tackling it. And so, last part here obviously brings us to the challenges of big data. It's not just your typical application and data. That's why, as we discussed before, you call it big data. Working with it contains many challenges. You have structured and unstructured data. And when I say that, it's usually a combination of both, not one or the other. The correlation and quality of data, sometimes from different sources, extracting information from that data, the compute resources that are available. Often it takes large volumes of compute, which is also cost and also time. It may take, even powerful compute, significant time to crunch and analyze it. The size of the data, moving data can be prohibitively time consuming. If you've got, terabytes of data, and a lot of times, we've seen like the images of the black hole that was very famously taken here not too long ago. They were actually dealing with petabytes of data. And so, moving that around and being able to transfer it is no longer feasible. And sometimes you have to move the compute to the data. And there's many more challenges. And so, we want to look at, what you want from the feedback and the needs. The New Mexico Technology Council, I want to give them a lot of credit, and the Big Data Peer Group. Everyone on this has been absolutely amazing, with their ideas, with getting speakers. I'd like to give you all, all the credit that you deserve, because you do deserve it. And, now we want to really have a discussion on what you want to see and what you want to get from it. What does big data mean to you? Obviously, that's why I set the groundwork of talking this context. What do you want to get out of big data? Are there relevant applications and things or that you either know of or that you would like to explore to, see how this could apply to you and where you're at? What would you like to see presented from future speakers? And any other topics that you'd like to discuss. And as always, we're always looking for involvement in our big data peer group, as well as speakers. To give you kind of a little bit of a primer, these are some possible, topics that we could look at. And, I'd like to thank Tony for helping with these. And, it's to give you an idea and kind of get your mind flowing as to what you'd like to, engage, or some possibilities that we have. So with that, I would like to open it up to discussion and to the roundtable. If anyone would like to talk and share.
I really like, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I really like number 2 on that list, the ransomware one. I think that's topical in a lot of ways, especially as a data person where you're not really a cyber person. I don't know who would speak to that, but I think that's very topical right now.
Oh, it is. And it's interesting that I mean, it really is big data, because you would think, oh, it's ransomware, it's a virus. It's like, just block it or just protect in it. And it's like, well, it's not quite that easy. Knowing what's good and what's bad, and being able to define that while still allowing the proper, software, and data stores and backups. Again, when it comes to big data, making a copy of big data um, can sometimes be challenging, just because of the sheer size and volume.
So, Mike, rather than us try and solve here, why don't
Yeah.
we just make note of that's one that people were interested in, and
Sure.
as the peer group committee, I think it's up to us to find speakers that are appropriate. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
worry about who we get to go speak. It would be my suggestion, but more, are we getting the stuff that's important to the folks that have taken the time to show up for this discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah, Scott, thanks for joining us today.
No, actually, I think that's a good point. And actually, where I'm at in this particular time, I think that second to last one, where what's happening at Lanel and Sandia, are actually of interest to me, selfishly. But and also I'm working with certain programs at the state of New Mexico on data lakes and some convergence of vaccination versus COVID tracking, COVID tracing. So I mean, there's a whole host of things to be shared. I think I would also say that. But that second one grabbed my attention.
Well, thank you. And remember, these are just kind of a primer of ideas. Feel free to mention other topics or things.
Yeah, I was going to say too, it's kind of good. It's good timing because we had, Sandia reach out to us and they're doing a study right now on AI and machine learning. And so kind of trying to bring in industry. So I think that would definitely be a good one for us.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask, what do people that are joining us think about the open source questions? Are those things people are confronting? Or do we have we just don't trust it, it's open source kind of view?
That's how I view it, but that's okay. I'm old fashioned.
I'd like to mention on the open source one and kind of my experience on it. They just had the cybersecurity peer group give a talk. Was it last week or week before?
Mm-hmm.
I think my internet connection got unstable there. I don't know if I cut out.
No,
But
talk about what?
They were talking about the new executive order for security on systems, and that if you're going to do contracting with the government or with any of the military or defense, that you have to basically list a lot of different security metrics, open source tools that are being used, because some of them have known vulnerabilities, and especially in specific versions. And a lot of times in big complex systems, it's weird to say, but it's actually hard for a lot of these companies to even know and list and do all those, to the point where they were saying a lot of small businesses, and when I say small, I mean smaller than like the Boeing or Raytheon or Lockheed's, that you're really just going to need to partner with a big player because it's going to be so onerous and so expensive. And so, and we deal with this all the time. I mean, who knows where these open source things in? There was a known vulnerability with Linux that got put in where if you had any privileges to the system, that you could basically elevate yourself to, you know, a super admin, you know, that was injected in the code. There have been several other very prominent ones that have gotten caught, but they actually got initially put in the release of a version of code.
So if I could pause you for a sec, Mike. Again, I think the question when I wrote these was, are people asking, as I know Andrew and I are working on a couple, you know, projects where one of the questions is, which open source database should we use?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And, you know, and in our case, we've both got a lot of experience, but a lot of people don't. So is that a question for entities, whether they be government, academic, or business, that are part of NNTC membership? Should we do a, you know, a survey, or we could talk about, you know, again, maybe Andrew would be the best guy to do, you know, looking at this is where we went. And similarly, business intelligence and frankly, ETL tools. And these are all big dollar decisions. And I've seen projects fail because somebody simply didn't have enough money to pay for more ETL licenses. Pick your favorite ETL tool. They're all expensive. You know, and you know, if you can't put the data into a data structure, you aren't going to do a lot of analytics on it and make decisions. So the question, the intent of both of those questions are people facing a, is this safe? Should I consider it? How do I know what works without spending, you know, literally months? And, you know, okay, I'm an architect. Architects find that incredibly entertaining to go away for 3 months and play with toys. But, you know, business people tend not to. So, you know, are these questions people are confronting? And should we, again, you know, go find appropriate experienced speakers to say, yeah, I've seen this 20 times and here's what the conclusions I've reached are.
I would find that interesting because for the most part, we've stayed away from open source, both in BI and databases because of my experience working for a utility, not for the government. At the government, you know, we've done things a little different here. But my question always is, well, if I'm not in control of it, you know, how is this working? How can I fit it in? And how can it help me control costs? Is this an area that I want to go down that could possibly help me control costs? Or is this an area that I just want to stay away from with a 10-foot pole because it's not robust enough yet to be able to handle the issues that you're bringing up? So I think that would be a very interesting conversation.
Also, from a usage standpoint on open source tools, at least when you're extending them and stuff like we do, licensing becomes critical. Especially some, you know, some licenses are great for business and some aren't. So on the open source stuff, I don't know about just using them because that would be a different model. But usually the licenses are a massive concern as well.
Well, there's certainly a concern if you're building products. Andrew and I both lived in a product organization at IBM for some years, and there was a whole team of people, including technical experts and lawyers. All they did was look at, can you use this? If you use it, what does that imply? But I think that's maybe less of an issue if you're somebody like a business or the city or whatever saying, well, if I brought this in, you know, is it even going to work? Much less what a license. I don't know, Andrew, what do you think?
Exactly. I mean, that was my part-time job, was dealing with what dependencies had certain licenses. But as a user, the license is largely not applicable unless you're going to touch the code. And that's when it matters. And most users just download it and use it. So if you're populating data in an open source database, you're largely immune to whatever the license says. It's just when you're putting in, you know, when you're modifying the code, that's when it matters. So I suspect that's what matters to most people, is what are the terms around use. And open source licenses, I'll go out on a limb and say they're largely not applicable, in my experience anyway, if you're just going to use it.
Well, maybe again, we should, since that appears to be a question for people, we should at least consider there's a topic there to talk about.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I've been, keeping a little bit of notes, and topic 2, which is the data issues if you're a ransomware, concerned about ransomware. This is not cybersecurity. Let me give you one simple example what's in mind. Suppose you're backing up your data off to a cloud somewhere and you feel really good because it's all someplace else and the ransomware evil people can't necessarily get it. Did you ever ask yourself how long it'd take to restore that data? Assume that a terabyte of data transfer from a cloud backup takes about a day. If you've got 20 or 30 terabytes off in your storage, and I bet people like Michelle do, you may not be in cloud, but you've got to have at least that much data. You really going to say, oh, sure, I'll just restore from backup, and the fact that I'm out of action for a month or more is okay? Maybe
Well, the question there becomes one of architecture, which I think is your specialty, which is, can I afford a hot standby that's off, that's protected, or do I have to rely on some method of backup, or did I do some kind of sharding that will eliminate some amount of damage? I mean, that's an interesting topic as to what you can afford to do, right? It's the same as cybersecurity. I have the best security I can afford.
Yeah. I mean, what you don't want to do is have to go explain to the board that, yeah, you got great backups, and if they give you 2 months, you can put everything back. That's not the discussion you want to be in. Where, instead, you know what a terabyte drive costs if you get on to Best Buy? You can get
I think that ties also into number 1, which is one of the things that we've been struggling with here at the city, is when is it time, or do we ever move to the cloud for some of the things that we're doing based on the cost and based on where technology is for even our relational databases and where we're at. So and I think those two play off of one another.
What they do. Okay. Do you want to pick this back up, Bruce? Or Mike, rather?
Yeah, and actually I was gonna say, number 6, controlling my costs for data systems, in the cloud or on-prem or anything else. I mean, what you kind of, I've seen as we're talking really here, it is really kind of the economics of big data. Because when you look at the economics of, like you said, being able to license the tools you need, the compute, the storage, the backup, the impact to business and downtime, and all the aspects of, at the end of the day, technically these are challenging, but there are solvable things to them. But back to that kind of statement, of what I can afford. There's an economic stuff. If you could just throw an unlimited amount of money at it, everything would be not okay, but at least manageable. But that's not everything.
If you don't have Deborah's unlimited budget, you have to think about these things, is what you're saying. So that sounds, are people interested in essentially an economics of using cloud kind of discussion?
I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah. Because, I mean, for example, what you don't want to do, and I personally experienced it, is the cloud bill comes in and it's like 8 times what you thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, okay, that sounds like another one. You know, if we take a few of these on, if we combine some of the open source into one talk, we would potentially here have, let me do my notes, topics 1, 2, 4, 5 together, and 6 could lead us to, you know, plan for most of the rest of the year, I would say.
And one thing to kind of make a bullet point under the economics of that is, obviously, like we were talking about, especially cloud, like, you know, our system is completely cloud-based. We run it on Google's cloud. I mean, there's Amazon, there's private data centers, there's all kinds of options, but you also have kind of a balance and a trade-off between cost, i.e. compute, and time, because you can get different resources. You can get SSD drives, you can get, you know, you can throw more cores and more processing at it. All that is cost, and it's that trade-off between basically cost and time.
Another thing that we're interested in at the city is looking at the last item and what services we might be able to partner with those organizations to help us be able to achieve projects that we maybe don't have the resources to do on our own, but would maybe be interested in a partnership to work with, like New Mexico Tech, and be able to augment staff or augment projects or have them do something for us that we just don't have time to do. So it'd be interesting to find out what sort of models they have for working with others in the community. And, you know, for some of the smaller companies that don't have large IT staffs, I mean, we definitely don't have a large IT staff, but, you know, even smaller companies that don't have large IT staffs, how might we be able to augment what we're doing in business with what they have to offer, and how their students could benefit from what we're doing and what we need.
Can you, I'm trying to, I don't know if anybody else is keeping notes, but I'm trying to make a note of that myself, but I'm not sure I've got a terse statement of it.
So basically, what options are available for partnering with our higher education providers in the state for working on projects? Because I had a conversation a couple of years with New Mexico Tech on what they've now moved out of their model, where what they were working on in big data involved, you know, government contracts and secrecy, and they couldn't share anything that they'd done, but they've moved out of that now and actually have some of that technology available to use on other projects. What does that look like, and how might that sort of partnership work? They're entities in which we can actually get easier contracts with, you know, from a purchasing perspective, because they're similar to us. They're not exactly like us, but they're similar to us. And so the procurement process is different working with them than others. And so what are they offering now, and what do they have going on that those in the community could benefit from?
So that might include, yes, Deborah, Mary, Emily, you guys have a relationship with Rainforest Innovations, I'm sure.
Mhm.
And of course, a relationship with CNM would be at least a couple. I know CNM's always looking for capstone projects for their classes if you've got short things. Okay, so I'm just making notes, and we'll share
Yeah,
them with the
I'm
committee.
taking notes too, Tony. Thank you.
Well, I'll send them to you, Deborah, and you can merge them if you wish. So
Okay, sure.
coherent view.
Yeah. And I think so, yeah, UNM Rainforest. But also
Yes.
that's where we can reach out to even Dwayne or Rudy, the CIO at UNM, and see if he can point us in the right directions. And maybe, you know, School of Engineering, have a relationship with the dean at the School of Engineering at UNM. And then, of course, we do at New Mexico Tech as well with Lori LeBrock, who's in the Cybersecurity Center. But if you're thinking kind of more with a focus on big data, right, Michelle?
Right. Well, and yes, big
And
data, AI,
AI. Okay.
even business intelligence tools.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, they do, the CNM does under their deep dive stuff now have their data science program. And so Tony's right on that. They have a bunch of capstones, and those capstones can be around stuff, though they tend to only be, I think they only get about 2 weeks on them, but doesn't mean that there can't be some expansion of that.
Yeah, and maybe in the 4-year and higher institutions, they might be prepared to, entertain a project for a semester or even a couple.
Mhm.
We don't ask, we won't get.
Right.
Exactly.
And people may not know that New Mexico Tech's even available as an option for hiring someone to do work for them. I don't know what the community knows out there as a whole, but I don't know that if I hadn't had an interaction with them, I would know that.
Yeah, and even within their cybersecurity center, they work out in the community and work with businesses and work with the school districts and probably I think even the municipalities as well.
Yeah, like I said, procurement can be easier dealing with entities in the higher education world than private industry.
The third to the last one really has been something I've been really passionate about, and that that's how does AI and big data matter to the average New Mexico business? Because I think there's back to what I was saying before about it's no longer just an academic exercise. It really is a practical necessity. I don't know that a lot of New Mexico businesses even know that it's practical or even know what questions to ask or where to
Exactly.
start with.
Mhm.
They don't even know what they don't know.
I think that's a good point because we've had a few conversations about AI, but it's not something that we have any expertise in and don't have time to go out and learn right at the moment.
So as I said, you probably have struggled with, even if you were going to look into it, you don't know what you could use it for, what questions to ask, or where to start.
Right. Or are we mature enough to even consider that as an option?
Mm-hmm.
How do you even explain it to the city council when you're asking them for budget? I mean, they're a useful proxy for many other organizations' executives.
Mm-hmm.
You want a what?
Yes, exactly.
And I like your note here. Probably need to define what we mean by average New Mexico business.
Right.
I mean, if average New Mexico business, are these just major labs, government, education, type areas and large companies, or are we looking at the medium-sized businesses that we have a lot of here? And
When I read that, my thought was that we would be targeting companies that aren't IT specialists, so not RS21 or not, some of those, but the city of Albuquerque. Technology is not our primary focus. Serving the citizens is our primary focus. So there's other businesses that are in Albuquerque that IT isn't their job. They just happen to have an IT company. They happen to have IT people. When I worked at Z-Coil, we had an IT department, but our focus wasn't on IT. Our focus was on making shoes or designing shoes, not the manufacturer. But
I mean, you've got people like the Isotopes and Heritage Hotels and folks like that who, I don't know, maybe there's something awesome they could do with this technology if it was explainable and consumable.
Mhm.
And maybe they're well advised to come back in 5 years. I don't know. I mean, that was.
Well, and I think that's the big question with it is, like you said, all these non-technology companies that have a lot to gain or lose with it, um, you know, they don't explore it because it's either scary, they believe it's just still academic, they believe it's just for the Walmarts and the IBMs and the Amazons, and you know, and they don't even know what questions to ask to start looking at it. And I think that could be a very useful engagement with the community, um, to be able to engage them, so not necessarily have all the answers, but at least be able to provide them the background and start pointing them in the right direction of what's possible.
And I think that those tackling AI for those that profile companies is largely out of reach, to be quite honest. And so really what they're going to encounter are vendors who may have done the hard work for them. So how do they decide what the vendors are saying is real? You know, what makes sense? That may be more helpful to them is to be able to have some kind of some ammunition to be able to evaluate vendors who provide AI offerings, because there's a lot of vendors out there who are putting the AI label on things, and it's not necessarily, you know, true to form as to what's really behind the hood. And I also, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's actually a great point.
Another thing is it's safe to say at this point that, you know, the intent of this meeting was to get feedback from the community, and I'll just call out the elephant in the room. We didn't quite get the audience that we expected. So then the question becomes, how do we get feedback from the community asynchronously on this? Because we're really largely talking amongst ourselves, which is good, but we typically do this. So we really wanted to get external feedback. So how do we get topics about topics or meta topics, so we can say, you know, community, when in any medium that you can provide us feedback, whether that's social media that we post a video and said, you know, say, hey, we'd like to get your feedback on this, or, you know, maybe a few of us, you know, go out to some of the companies and with a questionnaire or something of the sort. How do we get the asynchronous feedback that we can't get through these kinds of forums? That's just the nature of things. And unfortunately, I think someone mentioned that this is kind of the lull of the summer, so may not have been the best time, but it doesn't mean we can't get the feedback. So how do we do that? Because we're not going to get it today. That's clear.
Yeah, true. Good point, Andrew. Thank you. And I guess in one aspect, what we've started doing is surveys following the peer group meetings. You know, we can look at the attendance and even tally up or put together an email or a brief survey to those that have attended our big data meetings in the last year.
I think that would be good, but I think that's part of the equation. I think what might be interesting, like, you know, we're talking about here, you know, how does AI matter to the average New Mexico business, of actually maybe thinking about who we want to target, you know, so to speak, you know, more than just even maybe some typical technology companies and some technology people, but who do we want to, you know, who do we think would benefit, and do we want to engage in this endeavor and reach out?
Okay, well, that sounds great. Oh, Mary had an idea she wanted to share.
I was just sharing, Deb, that when I was talking to a potential member of the tech council, he'd expressed an interest in the data group. He works for Sandia and he collects data on the satellites. So I was just going to throw that out as an option. It sounds like you have a lot of things that you could discuss today, but when I'm talking to folks, and I'm always talking about all of our peer groups, you know, there's sometimes some opportunities. I don't know if that's interesting to this group, but I was just going to share.
And what about Experience IT as a forum? It seems like we have a fairly large captive audience to be able to take up a room for those who are interested in the data topics. They say, for instance, they've attended, track 1, 2, and 3, and that's the moment where they start their wheels start spinning about these topics and what's important to them. It'd be great if we could have a follow-up session, take over a room for half an hour, 45 minutes, and have it back and forth with those that attended the previous session and say, hey, now that you're here, what ideas do you have? What thoughts do you have? It'd be a good way to capitalize on their physical presence in the building to be able to get the feedback that we were hoping to get here.
Andrew, that's a great suggestion. And you do have an audience there, so I think
Yeah.
a lot of good information.
Mhm.
Do we have any idea, Deborah, as to the location of Experience IT yet?
I believe we're narrowing it down to the Embassy Suites,
Awesome.
just to keep it centralized.
Yeah, I went and checked out the new remodeled Sandia Casino, and it was pretty nice. I know we've held it there in past years, and it's not the only venue. It was
Let me
just,
turn off my camera for a minute.
We did approach Sandia, and they are not available for the dates that we have for the conference.
oh, okay.
So next steps are what here?
So I think one of the next steps is, we talked about, I think we can brainstorm of not just who we have engaged throughout, this past year to reach out to, but who we want to engage. And I think we can each independently just, whoever wants to collect it, Mary or Emily, we can just send those over and kind of aggregate them and bring them together so that we can reach out to a broader audience. And then I think we have some good suggestions as to topics, and we can continue to work on speakers and things that align with that.
Question
That sounds
on the announcements. Oh, sorry, Mary. Actually, question for you, Mary. Questions on announcements for these types of forums like today. Do we email non-members who have ever participated in the past year, say on some of these data talks? It seems like recurring attendance and not a personal invitation, but at least an email out there might be useful. And I'm not suggesting that, I'm not trying to give the back office homework. I'd be willing to help, but should we not be keeping track of past attendance and then targeting them specifically, since they're already interested in previous sessions, on any new content that we have, especially for today? We may have already done that, and it's just that, it was a miss. But if we haven't, that may be low-hanging fruit if we have lists of all the past attendees. I have some of them, so I could look at those again, and I'll be culpable in not thinking about that sooner. But anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Andrew, I think you were addressing that to me. This is Mary. So yes, as a matter of fact, we do that. And Emily has also started to put together targeted lists and reaching out to just the cyber group or just the big data group. So but all of these announcements go out in our weekly updates or monthly updates of events. And always when we have an event, we're always talking about what's coming up. And as far as the targeted audience, as far as looking back at the attendees from the previous, I don't know that we've done that, but I think that's a great suggestion. I mean, if they're on our distribution list, which, you know, we're hoping everyone, once they've attended at least one of our events, sign up for our distribution, then they're getting the information. But that's a great suggestion to make sure. And I think Deb mentioned that earlier as well.
Yeah, I don't know that a lot of them that attend end up signing up for the distribution lists. And, you know, the other thing is, and I know it's a lot of work. I mean, I appreciate all the hard work and time and effort that you put into it. But, you know, obviously there's those general, you know, announcements and emails. But for people who have specifically been engaged in the big data peer group or the cybersecurity one, and I'm also suggesting this for the other peer groups, this is what we want. We want a lot of people who aren't necessarily engaged or part of the technology council or receiving the normal regular technology council newsletters, but are interested in the particular topics. We want to keep them engaged in these peer groups. And so I think having something specifically go out for, you know, not necessarily to everyone, but have lists for the big data peer group, the cybersecurity and the other peer groups, have a list of engaged attendees. Because, you know, we talked about having a list of people we want to engage, or maybe have expressed interest but haven't, you know, come. We want to keep them in the loop because they're not necessarily getting the communications.
Yeah, and that's something too we've been adding into our beginning of our slides is encouraging people to sign up for the newsletter.
I mean, email is an imprecise way to reach people. And so we're working through our processes for how to collect people's email addresses and get them in the right places. But it sounds like maybe what you're suggesting is maybe like more of a comprehensive review. And maybe we could do that in a peer group meeting of like, you know, downloading all of our lists from all the peer groups for this year, for instance, and then looking at who came and which topics they came under. And, you know, if we could split up some outreach, and if outreach could also come from, you know, peer group members to say, hey, you know, join the mailing list, you know, another invitation to get involved, that might help as well. Because that's something we could revisit at a committee meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Something we can also at least ask about, when we've got speakers from organizations with marketing budgets,
Yeah.
we should encourage them, you know, hey, get this out through your marketing channels too.
Mm-hmm. Because it's frustrating for us as well. And so what we try to do is, you know, when we send it out to our board members, let's just say, to try to get them to not only participate, but to engage their staff and share the information with their teams as well as their clients.
Mhm.
So.
And we've also got academic members who can get this out to their schools of, fill in the appropriate blanks, might be engineering, might be computer science, might be something else. But again, there are people, you know, someone's coming to speak to us from, I don't know, Microsoft or Oracle or something. We should at least try and get them to use their marketing teams too, because they've all got huge ones with many millions of dollars of budget.
I agree.
Yep.
And
I mean, nothing compared to Sam Dickey, of course, but you know, Sam could probably get some words out too, and people of all sorts.
Yeah, yeah, sharing it with their clients, you know, so many of them.
Yeah.
Okay, well, terrific. Thanks for the feedback. And it might be interesting, yeah, to, you know, as we look at some of the previous attendees, Emily might kick me under the table. Good thing she's across the room. But if we do, you know, like a survey, Tony, we can compare our notes. And I think what might be interesting is if we do a survey, you know, which of the following topic areas, you know, kind of instead of what do you want to hear about, but what topic areas are you interested in?
And clearly there's a certain amount of, do we think we can find speakers too?
Yeah.
And people are usually busy, but you know, like we found in the past, you know, you mentioned from, you know, Comcast and other things that a lot of times if you ask, people are interested in doing it or participating as long as they have, you know, some availability. And so we shouldn't be afraid to, you know, think big and ask big.
And I did, after our meeting, by the way, talking about kind of thinking big for experience IT, I did reach out to Netflix. So we've got them investigating. And that was thanks to Bruce's suggestion. And I think he also mentioned it on that committee meeting. So keeping our fingers crossed on that, trying to get, and it's kind of funny, that guy who's their production policy of North America, he was actually with the film office here, and he's surprised at how many requests for speaking engagements Netflix has been receiving. So anyways, we think ours is a little bit of a different request, you know, related to like from, you know, whether it's the CIO of Netflix or CTO, whatever we can get. So anyways, he's working on that.
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing how that inquiry is going, because we kind of we were curious as to whether that technical presence was here for the movie industry. Be good to know that is the case or not.
Yeah, yeah. Luckily, Trish from Teen Years, she's been helping me facilitate it. She's really good friends with Nick, and so, which always helps, right? So he texted her and said he's working on it. So that's probably a good time for me to send a follow-up note and just kind of reiterate. So.
One quick thought on the Capstone Project. Some of those projects, I guess they're really technically related, but I wonder if the professors and or students would be interested in helping us think of ways and how we can improve our outreach through technical means. Say, for instance, let's just say a student collects all the data of the previous attendees and aggregates them, figures out some trends that we could find, or other ways for us to attract, to offload, say, you know, what Emily needs. She can specify what she's looking for and have them do some of that just to figure out, you know, have a resource to be on different ways to contact the community. I'm just thinking out loud here. Is that crazy talk, or is that would allocating a Capstone Project student be useful in helping us determine what is a preferable way to do outreach?
Well, it is crazy talk, but it's a great idea.
And is that CNM, the Capstone
So I've heard.
Project?
Yeah, CNM is the Capstone. You guys have got great relationships there, but I would think that kind of analysis Andrew talked about, their data science class might well be interested in.
It is a data use case, but it just so happens to help us figure things out too. So it covers both sides of the spectrum, I think. You know,
they like their students to do something that when they when they do their Capstone Project readouts, they're wanting to attract potential employers and, a few hangers on like me. But, they're really trying to showcase we learned stuff and you should hire these people. So a project like that would be, I think, very attractive.
And selfishly, it would help us too.
Mhm.
All the win-win.
Yeah.
Terrific. Okay.
Are we good?
I think so.
All right. Well,
2 minutes to spare.
yep. So, are there any other last things that we wanted to discuss? And I think we've actually had a good discussion and some good progress with this.
Yeah, Michael, do you want to share your slides? We can at least send them out to the folks that registered.
Yeah, not a problem at all.
Just send those over to Emily. That would be great.
Fantastic. I'll get them over to Emily.
Okay, well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day.